Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we slice through some pretty complex material, metaphysical texts, dense philosophy, and give you that knowledge shortcut you need.
And maybe a few surprises along the way.
Definitely a few surprises.
Today we are strapping in for what I can only describe as a fundamental rewiring of psychological theory.
That's a big claim.
It is. We're going to be exploring the source of all life energy, challenging, the titans of early psychology, and getting a pretty serious warning label about psychic exploration.
A warning label. I like that. And before we jump into that, which sounds fascinating and maybe a little chilling, we have our crucial declaration. This deep dive is based on the Seth Material, which is published by New Awareness Network, and we're distributing this free of charge on all major platforms for purely educational purposes.
That's right. We're here to guide you through it, not to preach it.
Exactly.
And our focus today is session 83 of the Early Sessions, Book 2 of Seth Material. It was recorded on a Monday, August 31st, 1964. And this session is, well, it's interesting because it's short. It comes after an unscheduled one, but it just hits like a lightning bolt. It delivers these core theoretical concepts about, the nature of matter, the inner senses, the deep structure of the self.
Okay, let's unpack this. But before we get to all that profound theory, there's something Seth always seems to do.
Right.
He grounds the work in the mundane, in just daily reality. And the opening of the session, it's this phenomenal predictive scorecard.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying, look, I can tell you where Bill went on vacation, so maybe, just maybe, you should listen when I talk about the creation of the entire universe.
That's exactly the function of it. It's about establishing fidelity. It proves a connection to our observable physical reality, which then, earns the right to make these really radical claims about inner reality.
Right. It builds trust.
It does. And we have 3 remarkable validations right at the start here, all of them confirming predictions he'd made earlier.
Okay, let's start with the one that genuinely reads like a newspaper headline, the narcotics story.
This is a reference back to session 63, which was in June of 64.
Right. So back in June, Seth gave this very specific, but at the time, totally unconfirmed prediction. It was about a narcotics issue, and it was connecting to a local hospital. And 2 days before the session, on August 29th, the local Elmira paper publishes the story.
You're kidding.
Nope. It confirmed the arrest of an addict, and that addict was linked directly to the theft of a doctor's bag and prescription blanks.
From an Elmira hospital parking lot.
Exactly.
The precision is what gets me. That's startling. It's one thing to say something bad will happen at a hospital, but narcotics?
Yeah.
A doctor's bag? Elmira? That was way past coincidence.
It does. It anchors the whole communication firmly in external events. It's objective proof that this inner vision, or whatever source he's tapping into, can actually view time and physical location outside of, our normal sensory boundaries.
So it's basically saying this isn't just philosophical rambling.
It's saying this communication sees reality. Wow. Okay. And then we move from the police blotter to something almost funnier.
Yeah.
The ridiculously specific travel log of Bill McDonald's vacation.
Right.
This is where the humor and the level of detail become almost tedious, which weirdly makes it even more impressive.
Well, Bill had just gotten back from Provincetown, and in earlier sessions, 68 and 75, Seth had given these really detailed, extensive descriptions of his trip. And when Bill came back...
He confirmed almost everything.
Almost everything, yeah. The 4 men, the room overlooking the water, all of it.
But the best part, for me, is the follow-up. This is where Seth acts like a slightly smug tour guide, clarifying the details that Bill forgot to confirm.
Yes, it's such a great little flourish. He's confirming the quality of the inner sight. He actually says, I did, however, see outside that night also a boat with a symbol on its bow. And this boat I'd mentioned earlier.
Okay, a boat with a symbol.
But he goes further. The boat was tied to a pier and was the first in line as you looked out from the room.
The first in-line detail is what kills me. It's so specific. Not just a boat with a symbol, but its exact placement. You can't just make that up.
You really can't. And he does the same thing with the bar. Bill must have mentioned a bar he went to. And Seth just zooms in. He clarifies. The bar did refer to the bar a few blocks away with a large keg in it, rather than any other bar, many of which were decorated with small kegs.
So he's distinguishing between the one big working keg and all the little decorative ones?
Yeah.
That's the kind of detail only an actual witness would notice. It's just a perfect, almost funny way of him saying, by the way, my inner senses are working just fine. Thank you very much.
Precisely. And speaking of specific timing, let's turn to the Miss Callahan prediction. This was about a day range, August 12th to the 15th.
Right. This was a health-related prediction. What was the confirmation on that one?
The event fell squarely in the window. Miss Callahan had a very light stroke on the 14th of August. The source notes actually mention that Seth used the word merely to describe it. Yeah, suggesting maybe it was, averted from being more severe, or it was just the lightest possible version of what was predicted.
And what's fascinating is how the symptoms were noticed, or rather how they weren't noticed.
Exactly. So on the 15th, the day after, she was showing more mental agitation. She was dizzy. She had some motor disability in her left arm.
Okay, those sound like pretty clear signs.
They do, but because she already had known pre-existing disabilities, these new symptoms just they got swallowed by the noise of her prior condition.
It just blended into the background. Nobody raised an alarm.
Nobody. So the event was accurate. The timing was dead on. But the lack of external awareness made it almost a non-event. Seth even pointed out that if she'd seen a doctor on the 14th, it probably would have been caught.
Which is a crucial point. The intercommunication can be 100% accurate. But our human interpretation and, just the circumstances around us can completely mask what's really happening.
It's a perfect example of that.
Now, before we move on to the heavy theory, we have to acknowledge this really sweet personal moment for Jane. Or Rupert, as Seth calls her entity.
We do. Seth offers his congratulations to her. She'd just been promoted to assistant director at the art gallery.
That's a lovely personal touch.
It is, but it also ties directly back into the bigger framework. He makes a note that her enthusiasm for teaching art history to children is a carryover from a previous life.
Ah, so he's connecting her current life success to her deeper entity abilities. It's not just a job promotion.
Exactly. It's a subtle bridge in the narrative. First, he establishes he can see physical reality, the boat, the bar, the stroke.
Right.
Now he's showing he can see into the psychological and, historical depths of the person he's talking through. And that, in a way, earns him the right to critique the established psychological structure of all mankind.
That is the perfect transition. We're moving from external validation into the core material of Session 83, redefining libido and the deep subconscious.
Let's get to it. This is the heavyweight critique. Jane, or Rupert, had been reading Carl Jung.
Oh, okay.
So Seth just jumps right in and takes on both Jung and Freud. And his fundamental claim is that these guys, the absolute pioneers of psychological depth, they only probed into the outer personal subconscious.
Only the outer layer. I mean, that feels a bit dismissive. They were so revolutionary, mapping dreams, primal drive.
Oh, they were courageous, absolutely.
Yeah.
No one denies that. They charted the personal history of the individual. The traumas, the impulses, all the stuff acquired in this life. But Seth's point is that they mistook the flow for the source. They were looking at the water coming out of the tap, but they never found the reservoir. He said Jung, in particular, saw glimpses of other depths, but that is all.
And those glimpses, according to Seth, led to some really fundamental misunderstandings about life energy itself.
That's the core thesis of this whole section. Seth says, and I'm quoting here, there are rather unfortunate distortions occurring in Jung's writings, as well as in Freud's, since they did not understand the primary cooperative nature of the libido.
Let's pause on that one sentence, because that is completely revolutionary.
It is.
For decades, psychology has defined libido, life energy, psychic drive, as this resource that's generated inside the individual. It belongs to you. It's shaped by your childhood. And Seth is just saying, nope, that's wrong.
He flips the definition on its head. He says the libido does not originate in the individual subconscious of the present personality.
Yeah.
That's just the processing center.
So if it's not generated by me in my own subconscious, where is the true source of all this boundless life energy?
It's the energy of the entity and inner self.
The entity.
Yeah, it originates at a level that's way deeper than your current conscious self can easily get to. Your conscious personality, your personal subconscious, they're basically just conduits. The energy flows from this deep entity core, and it's directed by means of the inner senses, outward, so to speak, through the deeper layers of the individual subconscious mind than through the outer or personal layers.
So my personal subconscious is less of a power generator and more of a filter.
Or a transformer.
It's a filtering mechanism, exactly. It takes this raw entity power and differentiates it into the impulses and drives that we recognize every day. And this is where that cooperative nature kicks in.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Because this is the underpinning of all physical existence. I mean, think about it. If libido were purely individual, the universe would just be chaos. It would be purely subjective.
A mess.
A total mess. But because the energy comes from this vast entity and inner self, which is by its nature connected to all other entities, its fundamental nature has to be cooperative.
We're not just socially or biologically cooperative. You're saying we are ontologically cooperative, like at the very root of our being. That's it. Seth tells us that this cooperative nature is indeed responsible in large degree for the psychic cooperation in which all entities are involved, in the construction of a physical world of matter that is inhabited by all on your plane.
Wait a minute. If I pull on that thread, does that mean that every single one of us, every conscious being, is engaged in this continuous subconscious psychic contract right now?
Yes.
To maintain the laws of physics, to keep matter coherent, the stability of the universe we're all sharing. If I just stopped cooperating, would this desk I'm sitting at start to fall apart?
That is the truly astonishing implication, yes. The physical world isn't a static background. It's a continuously generated, agreed-upon reality.
Wow.
We're all psychically holding it in place through the flow of our entity-sourced cooperative libido. If that psychic agreement were withdrawn, the structure of matter would cease to hold.
That sounds, frankly, exhausting, like a cosmic 24/7 reality maintenance job we don't even get paid for.
Well, the analogy Seth gives is perfect for this. He brings it down from the whole universe to biology. He says, you know that the individual cells of any form cooperate to form another, more complicated gestalt.
Right, like our bodies.
And without the cooperation, not only would the more complicated structure cease to operate, but the individual cells would also cease to operate.
So cooperation ensures the survival of the big structure and the survival of the individual unit. The universe is a giant gestalt, and our individuality is actually maintained through our participation in this massive psychic project.
And this duty is taken up instantly. He says when a new individual appears in the physical realm, that new entity source libido takes up its adopted duty of maintaining the physical universe along with all others and without hesitancy.
So it's a prerequisite for even existing here.
It is. So free will exists in how we participate, but not in whether we participate.
That's a key distinction.
He says cooperation is a necessity on all planes. It can be joyously, given freely, or it can be given in a grudging manner, but it will be given.
You can choose your attitude, but you can't choose to stop holding up reality while you're standing in it.
You got it. And this framework perfectly explains why the early psychologists stopped where they did.
Right.
They were looking at the surface layers, where that grudging or joyous cooperation gets filtered. They weren't seeing the absolute necessity of the source itself.
They saw the personal stuff, the traumas, the impulses from this life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Freud was courageous in mapping all that. He gave us the map of the personal self. But Jung, who sensed that collective unconscious, he got scared of what was beyond it. He hit a wall.
What was he afraid of?
Seth says Jung feared, basically, such a journey because he felt that it led only to the racial source. Jung was afraid of a complete loss of his individual identity. He thought the journey would end in this bottleneck of a first womb.
A first womb.
Yeah.
Like an undifferentiated primal soup where all personality just dissolves.
Yeah, that's a deep, deep psychological fear that if you look too closely at the collective foundation of humanity, your unique sense of, just vanishes.
The fear of being swallowed by the mass.
Mm-hmm. But Seth corrects this. He says that what Jung feared was actually a gateway. He says beyond that bottleneck, there is an opening up into other realms. That struggle for individuation is a necessary step, but it's not the final destination.
So that lack of limitation beyond the bottleneck is where we find the true scope of the self. So what's the ultimate goal of this inner work then?
It's not just about self-improvement. It's ontological discovery. The goal is to study those deepest reaches, to discover man's true origins and the mechanisms and ways in which the unseen self operates, forms his universe of matter through psychic energy.
So we're functioning with a severely reduced sense of our own identity. Seth says man sees not even half of the whole entity, which is himself.
That's the idea. The inner work is about integrating that whole self.
And that kind of journey, it requires incredible courage, but it also requires a lot of preparation. You can't just dive headfirst into the source of your own existence if your psychological structure is, brittle.
And that brings us directly to the warnings. The necessary warnings about discipline and flexibility in inner exploration. This is probably the most practical takeaway for anyone listening.
Like a caution tape.
It is the ultimate caution tape. Seth references the fact that Jane and Rob have been reading the Edgar Cayce material, and he agrees with Cayce that there are severe dangers in undisciplined dabbling with the subconscious.
So this is a universal rule.
Absolutely. And he says that's why their work, these sessions, progressed slowly and surely in a disciplined manner.
It sounds like the subconscious it's a mechanism that demands a huge amount of respect. But what exactly is the danger? Is it external forces? Or is it more of an internal collapse?
It's internal collapse caused by rigidity. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Seth defines the truly dangerous person for this kind of exploration.
Who is that?
It's the person with a rigid personality pattern, one that's held tightly in a vice of, shall we say, extremely immobile subconscious psychosis.
That is a chilling phrase. Immobile subconscious psychosis. What does that rigidity even look like in day-to-day life?
It's someone who just can't adapt. They can't integrate new information if it challenges their core beliefs, especially about themselves. They rely on these tightly controlled, often neurotic defense mechanisms to keep massive, unprocessed stuff buried deep down.
So they're inflexible, creatively blocked, terrified of change.
They're like psychological rock. And what happens when you introduce the immense pressure of entity-level energy and truth into a structure that brittle?
It shatters.
Seth warns that anything rigid breaks easily when any new pressures are applied. So if this rigid person, maybe through drug use or uncontrolled mediumship or some sudden trauma, finds a pathway into their subconscious, the result is horrific.
This is the famous lava metaphor. The rigid rock explodes.
That's it. The pressure from the deeper self can't flow smoothly, so it's blocked and it explodes. The rigid rock at its core explodes into a lava of uncontrollable fantasy. And the terror at the base of such a personality is then externalized, and the individual forced to face, under the worst possible conditions, those personal disruptions buried for so long.
So the monsters you created and buried in your personal subconscious are what greet you at the door when you force it open without preparing.
And they become externalized. They start dominating your reality. This really underscores the link between just your daily psychological health and any kind of safe inner exploration. You have to be flexible.
And this is why Jane and Rob were considered ideal for this. Not because they were perfect, but because their psychological structure was fluid.
Seth confirms that. He says their neuroses, and he's clear that everyone has them, are handled safely because of their inherent fluidity and flexibility. And crucially, that flexibility is maintained and used through creative sublimation.
Their writing, their art, their creative output is basically a pressure release valve?
It's a psychological safety valve, yes. He says their neuroses are rather efficiently used through sublimation in your own creative activities. And then he gives us the definition of the truly dangerous state. The closed and dangerous subconscious is that one which is closed both to inner depths of inspiration and also to outer doors of expression.
So if you block the inflow and you block the outflow, you've essentially created a psychological bomb.
You have. That is a really profound affirmation for the value of creative expression. It's not just, a nice hobby. It's essential psychological maintenance for a flexible mind.
Which you need to handle the truths that emerge from that deeper entity level.
Exactly.
So now that we get the mechanisms, Seth takes a moment to address his own identity. And this makes sense. Since this material was always intended for wider publication, he had to clarify what he is, and maybe more importantly, what he isn't.
He spends a good amount of time just preempting all the standard questions and misconceptions about spirit guides and channeling.
Okay, so what is he not?
First, he's not a control in that typical mediumistic sense, which kind of implies possession or dominance.
And he dismisses the obvious psychological explanations right away.
Immediately. He's not a split personality. He's not some manifestation of Rupert's or Jane's latent male tendencies. He even argues that Jane already has so much creative output, published and unpublished, that she doesn't need him to express some unfulfilled urge.
So it's a cooperative communication, not an internal struggle.
Right. And he even throws in a bit of humor. He says he's not a creepy spirit to wiggle my ears at the first suggestion for applause, for parties, or for your pleasure.
It's a very grounded rejection of all that spiritualist theater.
It is. And he tackles the fear of evil entities. He basically suggests that demons or evil spirits are usually unfortunate creations of a psychotic mind that have been hiding in the personal subconscious for a long time. Since Rupert's deep self is flexible, that danger is basically nullified.
So after defining himself by what he's not, he gives us the positive definition. What is Seth?
He says simply, I am an energy personality essence. That's the framework. An enduring personality that exists outside of a physical form, communicating with two personalities who are currently operating within physical reality.
And he also clarifies the name Rupert, which can be a source of confusion.
It can. He explains that Rupert happens to be a male name simply because the name is the closest translation, in your terms, for the name of the whole self or entity, of which he is now a self-conscious part.
So Jane is the current conscious expression of this vast entity known as Rupert.
She's a splinter personality of it, yes. So the structure is Jane and Joseph are cooperating personalities, and Seth is an entirely separate energy personality essence, cooperating with them to produce this material.
And because this material is meant to help people, Seth lays out a really clear mission statement, a set of core ethical principles.
He does. They act as a standard you can judge all the material against.
And he starts by listing the 4 things he will never advocate for, which is a powerful way to filter out the usual pitfalls of these kinds of esoteric paths.
It is. He says Seth will never advocate for withdrawal from the outer world, prejudice of any kind, activities injurious to health, or fanaticism.
That just immediately rejects all the typical dangers of cult-like behavior or spiritual elitism. It insists on balance, on engagement with the world you're creating.
He captures that perfectly when he says, commitment, yes. Fanatic commitment, no. The work requires diligence, serious study, but not detachment or fundamentalism. The whole purpose is to help mankind understand himself, so that he may understand the world which mirrors his inner reality.
And he's also very clear that the recipients, Jane and Joseph, they're not superior beings.
Absolutely not. They just have certain facilities for this kind of communication and perception, just like other people have different abilities that they don't. It's not about creating an elite class of spiritual people.
And finally, he insists on a very specific attitude for this journey, one that integrates this profound knowledge without falling into, ego inflation or false humility.
He rejects what he calls false and inadequate conception of self, which includes that sort of groveling humility. Instead, he insists on an honest, humble, and proud acceptance of your own relationship with the universe, and an acceptance of your responsibility in it.
Honest, humble, and proud. That triad really does encapsulate the whole thing.
It does.
Honest about where you are now, humble before the vastness of your own entity, and proud of the courage and the responsibility it takes to explore and maintain reality. It requires genuine grit.
And that ties it all back to the core theory, that courage is necessary because this journey leads so far beyond the personal subconscious. Until the entity is understood as the real source of the libido, man will just remain ignorant of his true self and his role as a psychic co-creator of matter.
It has to be diligent, consistent, intuitive, and flexible.
All of it.
So what does this all mean? Let's try to summarize the big 3, the core theoretical takeaways from this session we've been unpacking.
Okay. First, the revolutionary idea about life energy. The libido is not some limited psychological resource your personality generates.
Right, it's entity energy.
Exactly. And its fundamental cooperative nature is the ongoing psychic contract that literally maintains the stability of the physical world. If you exist, you're cooperating.
Okay, that's 1. What's number 2?
Number 2 is that the subconscious is vastly deeper than Freud or Jung ever mapped. Freud found the personal layers, and Jung got scared of the racial source.
But Seth says that's not a dead end. It's a bottleneck.
It's a necessary bottleneck.
Yeah.
And beyond it lies an opening up into these unlimited realms, which leads to our true entity origins and how we actually form reality.
And third?
And third is the practical part, the absolute necessity of disciplined flexibility. Inner exploration is inherently dangerous for the rigid personality.
Right. It will shatter, it'll externalize all its buried neuroses as a lava of uncontrollable fantasy. And creativity and balanced, non-fanatical commitment. The kind of commitment that stays engaged with the outer world. Those are the keys to making sure it's a safe, steady inner journey.
The ultimate purpose of all this is to help us understand ourselves so we can understand the world, which is just a mirror of our inner reality. It's a terrifying and exhilarating endeavor.
It really is, and we highly encourage you, the listener, to explore this transformative material further for yourself. Our discussion today was drawn from Session 83 of the Early Sessions Book 2 of Seth Material. And we credit the Seth Material and the publisher, New Awareness Network.
And to really delve into these books, to see the full scope of Seth's work and the context of these communications, you can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. That address is sethcenter.com/New the early sessions.
There's a whole entity of knowledge waiting for you there.
There is.
And finally, a provocative thought to leave you with, building on the framework we established today.
Seth, an energy personality essence, states clearly that personalities continue to exist and communicate after physical death. If that death is just a transformation of personality, not an end, if that were to move from being philosophical speculation into just general, accepted, global human belief, what radical fundamental shifts in our social structures, our economic goals, the fear of aging, and just our daily life priorities might occur as we redefine the entire nature and timescale of our existence?
If the life you're living now is just one of many conscious projections, how would you spend today?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.